thank you that you are in this place with us this morning. We thank you that your presence is here, and it's not just here just to show up, but to show out, to lift us up, in our heads, lift us up in our hearts, lift us up in our bodies and our spirits in every single way. And we just thank you, Lord, that both of these services and the service in the back for the children are going to go just according to your plan. We thank you, God, that we have hearts to listen to you, and that we didn't just come here just to show up, but we came here to hear from you. We give you glory and honor and praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen. The kids will be having Sunday school this morning. Megan's going to teach Sunday school, and then they'll be back in here for the regular service. So you guys are dismissed for Sunday school. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You can be turning with me to Daniel chapter 3. I'm going to be talking about a very familiar story this morning. You've all heard it. If you grew up in Sunday school, you've heard it since you were a child. But I woke up, sometimes the Lord tells me what to speak on during the week. Sometimes he tells me the night before, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes not till I get here. But he hadn't told me yet what to speak on. And then I overslept, but that was okay, because the last thing that I dreamed about before I woke up, I was talking to someone, and the last thing they said before I woke up out of my sleep was, I've been through the fire and I've been through the flood. And so immediately when I got up, I started thinking about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and how they went through the fire. And the Lord just started speaking to me that there's a lot of people that feel like they're going through the fire this morning, or feel like the threat of the fire is in front of them. And it's confusing to us because we have, a lot of times you feel like I got this great word that I was going to have this breakthrough, that I was going to have this great thing happen, and instead here I am facing the fire. And I thought it was going to be this way, and now I'm in the middle of a fire. Lord, what's happening? And when I went to go get my notebook to open it up and write down some notes, I saw a few weeks ago I fasted for a few days, and on the first day that I fasted, the Lord had given me a song about breakthrough. And so when I saw that, I thought, there is that, and that's what I titled my message was, there's breakthrough even in the fire. You can't let the fire make you think that it's over. So if I'll be like Matt, if I don't read, I'll start preaching and I'll never get to the reading part. But we all know the story that the king set up an image. He was a heathen king, and so he set up a heathen image. And he told everybody that they had to bow. And I'm going to start reading in verse 4. It says, Then Herod cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falleth not down and worship it shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So first they had the threat. And, the Bible never says the threat won't come. Jesus said, I'm not taking you out of the world. I'm leaving you in the world. But don't be afraid, because I've already overcome it. Yeah. He didn't say, in fact, it says later on, it says to rejoice when you see trouble and tribulation. And we don't often do that. Right. And we've all been guilty, myself included. We see trouble and tribulation, the last thing we do is rejoice. Right. We might cry, we might scream, we might kick, we might get mad, but we don't rejoice. Yeah. But it said to count it all joy when you find yourself in the fire. Why? Because when you're tried with fire, you come out like gold. Yeah. It takes all the impurities out of you. So the threat comes. Remember in the book of Acts that they came to them and they said, look, You can teach about whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, but do not mention the name of Jesus. Don't do it. And what did the disciples do? They went and they did not stop preaching in the name of Jesus. What they did was they went to the Lord and they said, Lord, you behold their threatenings. You behold what they're saying about us. You behold the threat that's before me, and you handle it. Because not teaching in his name was not an option. Giving up was not an option. And it was just continue in verse 7. It said, therefore, at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, and psaltery, and all kinds of music, that all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Everybody else did it. Everybody else bowed. And it's real easy to go along with the crowd when they're all bowing. It's real easy when you're in the midst of a bad situation and everybody's talking bad to just join into the bad. The honest truth is that in our flesh, it's real easy, even when you're just talking to your neighbor, to join in with the bad. They start talking about how bad anything is, how bad the body is, how bad their family's acting, how bad the country's acting, how bad the HOA is, how bad anything. And it's real easy just to join in and bow down to the negative. And that's what was happening. Nobody questioned it. They heard the threat, so they just bowed down because they didn't want to deal with the fire. Then in verse 8 it says, wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all the kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods. They worship not the golden image thou hast set up. Has it ever occurred to us that maybe the only reason we're going through the fire is somebody heard that we weren't going to bow? Somebody on your job heard you weren't going to bow. Somebody in your family heard you weren't going to bow. Somebody heard that you weren't going to bow. You told your body, I'm not going to bow to you anymore, and you get up the next morning and it feels worse than it ever felt. Right after you said you weren't going to bow. You make up your mind that I will not bow to lack and poverty, and then, a week later everything you've got's gone. And it looks worse than it's ever looked. And you feel like, why am I going through this? Why are people accusing me? Well, I make up my mind to walk in love, and everybody around me goes crazy and makes me not want to walk in love. I make up my mind I'm going to church no matter what happens, and everything that could happen to go wrong in that day to stop me from getting there goes wrong in that day to stop me from getting there. I made up my mind I'm going to praise and worship, and everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. You turn on the praise and worship, and the kids want something else on. You turn on this, and I've been there. You try it out in the living room, and everybody's in there making a ruckus. You try it in your bedroom, they follow you to your bedroom. No matter what you do, it's like it just follows you wherever you go. You've made up your mind to do this. You made up your mind to fast. You're hungrier than you've ever felt in your whole entire life. And it's only been 5 hours since you started fasting. But you feel like it's been 5 days. Because as soon as you make up your mind not to bow, there's going to be a challenge there. Why? That's just the world. The world don't care what you do as long as you're going along with them. They don't care. If you're broke like them, they don't care. They really don't care if you have money as long as you got it the wrong way. As long as the Lord didn't just bless you with it, As long as you either worked your tail off for it, or you got it through ill-gotten gain, or something like that, one of the ways they can conceive of. The world don't care if you're sick, but Lord forbid that you be healthy all the time. That's the truth, right? The doctor don't care if you come in and see him 5 times in 1 month. But if you miss one appointment because you're feeling so good you don't need it, they're going to be calling you up telling you how you missed your appointment. Why? Because they don't care if you bow. They care when you stand up. People on your job will leave you alone as long as you just do what they want all the time.
Amen.
But the minute you take a stand that I'm going to live right, I'm going to live godly, I'm going to do what's right, I'm not going to go in and join in all their gossip, I'm going to be separate. I'm going to be that separate people. That's what ecclesia, the church, means. You're called out ones. You're going to look different, act different. And I don't mean having to not cut your hair or do any of those things. I mean just your very presence will be different than what the world is used to. Because you have a different mindset. And that's a threat to them. So don't think, sometimes we face a fire and we think it's because we've done something wrong. We think it's because we missed it. Sometimes when we're standing in the middle of the fire, we think, I must have missed God somewhere. I must have just missed it. When really, you were right on target the whole time.
Yes.
So what happened with Jesus? He told them to go to the other side. And right in the middle of going to the other side, they hit a storm. And most of us would have turned back right there because we must have missed God. No way he'd tell us to go to the other side knowing there's a storm in the middle. We must have just missed it. And that wasn't it at all. What mattered was how they acted in the storm. Jesus just wanted to show them that no storm can stop you from getting to the other side. If I say go to the other side, I mean go to the other side. That's why he could sleep. Because he had already said it. He had already spoken it. He had no fear that they weren't going to make it, no matter what they faced along the way. He had no fear that his word would return to him void. If he said it, it was going to happen. So just if you found yourself in a fiery trial place, it does not mean you've missed God. It does not mean you're on the wrong track. It does not mean he's forsaken you. It means that you took a stand. It means that you got to keep on standing. And we're going to keep reading. It says, let's see what verse we stopped in. And then verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do you not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? The Lord told me this morning, a lot of us have been wondering, where's God? Where is he in all this? And maybe you've even had people say to you, if your God's so big, that's exactly what Nebuchadnezzar said. Who is this God that's going to save you? Who do you think is going to get you out of this fire when I throw you in it? And whether it's been in your own mind or whether it's been voices telling you, you have this question, where is God in all this? Who is this God that said he was going to deliver, and yet here I stand, about to be thrown into a furnace? Where is he? Where did he go? Why isn't he here? But listen to what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful. That means we're not afraid. We're not afraid. We're not going to choose our words carefully here. We know exactly what we came to say, to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. You have to make up your mind before what the answer is. Matt tells you this all the time. You make up your mind to say yes before God ever asks. You have to make up your mind what your answer is before you ever get up there. You cannot face terrible problems with an unmade up mind and expect to overcome them. It just won't work, not for any of us. If you don't have your mind made up that the Lord God is your healer, then if someone tells you you have cancer, it's going to be very hard to believe him in the middle of that to be your healer if your mind has not been made up. If you don't have your mind made up that he's your provider, and you go in and you don't have money, and there isn't food in there to feed your babies, it's going to be very hard to stand on the word if your mind wasn't made up. And when they came into this situation, they had their mind made up that, yes, our God is able to deliver us. But beyond that, even if he doesn't, I will not bow. I heard Jesse Duplantis say one time that if he died sick, he'd still be proclaiming that God was a healer. Why? Because he said, because the word is more real and more trustworthy than my body, than anything else that I'm facing. It's above every single circumstance that I can face. The word outlives it all. So I don't care what happens to me. The word is true. If I can get it to work in my life or not is not what's going to determine if it's true. My circumstances will not determine that it's true. I'm going to say it because the word says that about God. That's it, period. And that's the kind of mind you have to have, that I don't care what I go through, I don't care what I face, my knee won't bow. It won't bow to somebody else, it won't bow to myself, my own flesh, it won't bow to anything, it won't bow to poverty, sickness, lack, disease, family troubles. You'll never get me to say that it's beyond the grace and the blood of Christ. And they said this when they didn't even have Christ. They said this before they even had the cross and that to stand on and to say that it's a finished work. They were so convinced that God was God and every other man a liar. They said, we don't care if we die proclaiming it. Our God is God. We don't care what happens to us, but know this, our God is the only one true God. We have to get that in our heads, because when you face things, you have to be able to look at them and say, my God is the only true God. You can scream all you want, you can tell me how powerful you are all you want, but I only serve one master. He's the only one. The word says that he is God and there's none other beside him. That means there's not even another thing out there with power. Jesus said, all power and authority I give unto you. It's screaming and telling you it has power, and it's lying. It's lying and telling you it has power. It only has as much power as you give it. Because we have the power. The sons of God are the ones with all the power. Anything that comes up and starts screaming it has power will only have that which you give to it. It'll only have that which you allow it to have. It really has none. It's kind of like, remember the people that lied to the children of Israel? Remember how they lived close. And they heard that Israel and their God were kicking everybody out, taking over the land. So what did they do? They told a lie. And they didn't just tell a lie. They got the image of the lie. They went, they ran their horses and their cattle all around, made them look real tired, ripped up their clothes, threw a bunch of dirt on themselves, made it look like they had been traveling a long, long distance, and then came and said, we're from a long way off, and we want league with you. All we want is that you just let us stick around. We'll be your servants. We'll do whatever you want, but just let us stick around. Well, it was a lie. They were from just over the river. But they believed what they heard and what they saw. You say, well, but you don't know what I'm looking at. Oh yeah. I know that sometimes it's not just what you're hearing that's a lie, it's what the very thing you're looking at that's a lie. I know it can show up and even look like a lie, not just sound like it, but look like it. But it does not make it true. And so, they asked for what seemed like a little thing, because they told him, I'm going to be your servant. And sometimes we allow, those little foxes that spoil the vine because we think they're no big deal. They look like it's no big deal. But the big deal was that as they stayed in the land, they started to marry in with the children of Israel. And they had their own gods and their own ways of doing things. And they enticed the children of Israel to come do it their way. So they said, we'll be your servants, but really, in the end, they made the children of Israel their servants. They drawed them over to serve their gods and do their things. And a lie will do just that. It will tell you it's just no big deal. It's a small thing. Even a little bit of sickness a little bit of lack, a little bit of contention, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of envy, a little bit of fear. All these things, they seem so small. And before you know it, you're serving them. So you have 1 week where maybe you're just a little bit short. And you think, oh, that's no big deal. I just won't give quite as much, or I'll just, cut back a little. And then, before you know it, you're very much short. Because you've bowed down your knee to that. You let it decide how you're going to live. You get a little cough, and you just shrug it off. You don't tell it no. Now, I'm not saying make it a big deal and have a 40-hour prayer meeting over a cough. But what I'm saying is you have the right to tell it no. You have the right to say, no, you can't live here. Because that little cough, before you know it, then you can't even get out of bed, you have the flu. Or for some people that really don't know about God and really don't know about healing, don't even have anywhere to turn, in 2 weeks they have pneumonia. Yeah. Over a little thing because they just allowed it to sit there. Because they just allowed it. We know that even in the natural things in our own home. If you have this place where you have a tendency to sit something down in the wrong spot, like your dining room table or your wherever it is. Ours is our dining room table. We have a tendency to sit stuff at the end of the table. Before you know it, if I put my purse there and leave it, before you know it, Alyssa's put about $3 up there. And the boys have come by and they didn't feel like walking into their room to put something up, so they stuff it up there. And before you know it, it's just a big mess. And you got to go put away 10 things that started as one little purse last night, and by the time you get to it the next day, it's 10 things. It's the same way if you let these little things crawl into your spirit and just let them rule, have their little location. Like Michelle O'Donnell said, it's your little teddy bear that you hold on to and don't want to let go of. But it becomes this big stumbling block in your life because you just let it creep in and keep coming and keep coming. That's why I know sometimes the Lord will speak to me about something and I'm like, God, that's such a small thing. He'll tell you to go apologize over something you said, and you said 40 times worse than that 5 years ago, and you didn't go apologize over it, and you think, why do I have to do this? Because when you sit in a church that preaches the word, and you're changing constantly, you get to the point where it's these little changes, and it feels like such a small thing, and yet it brings such a big breakthrough in your life. It can bring it can be the very thing that brings breakthrough, but you're just holding on to these little things. Well, why do you have to let go of the little things? Because He wants all of us. He didn't come to do a halfway job. There's no such thing as halfway salvation. He didn't come just to save your spirit. I'm so glad He saved our spirit. I'm so glad that I know that when I go out of this body, I will be with the Lord. But He didn't come to just do that. He came to save me spirit, soul, and body. That's His perfection. He said, be holy because I'm holy. And I used to read that as a kid and think, how on earth can we be as holy as God? I mean, could you ask for something a little bit harder? Then in another spot it says, be perfect because I am perfect. How? But now I see that it's through His grace and His power, but you have to be willing when He comes and He says, do this, that even in the small things you do this. If you get willing in the small, we tell you all the time, then you'll be willing in the big. We all want a big breakthrough. Right? We all want this big manifestation. But sometimes we won't even allow the little manifestations in. So what makes us think that we're just going to get this jumbo manifestation when we haven't even allowed the little bit in? If you can't even get, we talk about coming in here into these services. If you can't get in the Holy Ghost in these services, well, you're not going to be able to go into a hospital and deliver the whole entire hospital. You have to be able to flow where it's easy to flow, much less when you have to go out in the world and it's not as easy and nobody's on your side. If you can't give $10, you won't give $10,000. You have to be willing to listen even in the small things that God asks you to do. You have to have an answer that says yes before you ever even hear the question. And that's what they had. They had this determination. They were going to only serve their God and have no other gods before him, no matter what they faced. Then in verse 19 it says that then Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because once upon a time he liked them. Once upon a time he had put them in favor. But now, because they wouldn't do what he wanted, his face changed against them. Have you ever had somebody's face change against you? They used to be your friend. Sometimes 10 minutes ago they were your friend. And then it can just take one thing, that because you won't bow to their way and to their will, it just changes just like that. Therefore he spake and commanded them that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. It was so fast that they didn't take off their clothes, anything. They just grabbed them up, bound them up, and threw them in. Have you ever felt like something happened so fast that you didn't even have a chance? Didn't even see it coming? It was just 1 minute it was one way, and the next minute you felt like you just got thrown in. And then you found yourself in the midst of this situation thinking, God, what do I do now? What are we going to do? And a lot of times we sit around. And that's our prayer. Lord, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What should I do? What should I do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And that's what happened to them. They got thrown in. And I want you to see how they fell down bound in the midst. So they fell down and they were bound. But then read in verse 24, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake and said to his counselor, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose and walking in the midst of the fire. So they went in bound, and they fell down. But when he looked in, they were loose and walking around. Because why? Because sons of gods are fire walkers. We don't succumb to the fire. We walk around in it. And the only thing you lose, what is the only one thing that they lost? They lost their bonds while they were in there. It was the only thing that burned off of them, was their bonds. We're kicking and screaming, wanting God not to let us go through the fire, and the only thing that's going to happen in the fire is you're going to get free. The only thing that's going to happen while you're in there is you're going to stop laying down, you're going to get up and start walking around. That's all that's going to happen. We're so scared of what's going to happen. I'm telling you, nothing's going to happen, but you're going to get free. So walk on in it. You might as well. I mean, they were going in the fire. They were going in the fire either way. So if you're going to go in the fire, you might as well get free while you're in there. Sometimes we just keep going through the same storm, and we go through that storm again, and we find we're like the children of Israel. We're just wandering around the same old mountain, and we don't learn anything, and our hands are still bound, and we haven't let anything come off of us yet. And then we sit around and wonder, why do I have to keep going through this? When if we just go through it, go ahead and let the fire burn anything off that needs to be burned off. It could be a very quick process. For so long we thought, we had to go through this process. But I'm like Bill Winston. I don't like long battles. I like quick ones. Why? Because long ones wear you out. They wear you out. They wear out your physical body. They wear out your finances. They wear out everything when you have to walk through this long battle and this long process. And I told you before that, Jesus went into the wilderness too, but he only stayed 40 days, not 40 years. It's how you act while you're in that situation that determines how soon you get free. It's what you let God do in you while you're in there. Because you can be like Daniel and go in the lion's den and have absolutely no harm come to you. Just sit down there and relax yourself for one night, and before you know it, it's over. And all those bad things, I'm sure that in his mind there were a million terrible things that you could think of going into a den of hungry lions. But all the bad things that he could possibly think of, and all the bad things that King Darius thought of, because remember, King Darius was upset. He was thinking of all the terrible things that could happen to Daniel. What if God didn't show up? What if all these things? But all those things he feared did not come on Daniel. What happened to Job? The thing that he greatly feared came upon him. If we would go through our situation and not expect all these bad things to happen to us, if we could walk through it and say it has no power over us. You know, you can walk through cancer and not have one thing happen to you. People have done it. They've even gone through chemo and not lost any hair, not been sick, none of these things, because they went through it with the power of God. One time, Creflo Dollar got a bad report. And he went about it the way you're supposed to go about it. First of all, he said, I'm going somewhere alone. I think it was a cabin or something. He said, no, I'm not doing anything but getting along with God. All he took with him was some jugs of water so that food wouldn't even be an option so he could fast. And in 4 days, he came out, and all the reports had changed. And it all turned back to negative. He just walked right through it, and it never had any power over him. Couldn't harm him. Couldn't hurt him. Didn't even have a symptom. Why? Because he just chose to walk right through it. He just made a decision. I'm going through this, and I'm not bowing down to it, and I'm not going to give it any power, and I'm not going to give it my attention. I'm going to give one person and one alone my attention, and that's the Holy One of Israel. That's it. We just sang the song, Reign, Jesus, Reign. I'm going to let him reign and nobody else. I'm going to give it all to him. It's not up to me to fix it. It's not up to a banker to fix it, a doctor to fix it, a psychiatrist to fix it, anybody else to fix it. God is going to take care of this. He's the one that solves it. So he saw them, and they were loose, and they were walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, he said. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Because you're never alone. Yeah, I told you that. That's what he said to them. He said, who is this God that's going to save you? And many of us have been sitting around thinking that. Where is God in the middle of this? As if we're alone. But we're not alone. There's someone right there in the fire with us. And if you got him in the fire, you're good. You don't have to worry about a thing. He's right there. He told his disciples, he said, lo, I am with you always, even to the ends of the age. I'm always going to be with you, no matter what you walk through. It may feel like the loneliest time in your life, but it's not, because he's right there with you. You may not be able to feel him, and that's okay. We don't live by how we feel. We sing that song, I'm not moved by how I feel, or I don't live by how I feel, I'm not moved by what I see. I know my God has made the way for me. He has. I don't care if I have to go through a fire to get there. I don't care what it looks like right now. He's made the way for me. He's right here with me. And nobody else. I tell you all the time, it is wonderful that we have this place of worship to come to, where people will stand in agreement with you. But if you have nobody, you have him. If you're in some country where nobody can stand with you, and you're all alone, you still have him. He doesn't leave. He doesn't go anywhere. His Spirit dwells within us. He's with us at all times. He's right there beside us. In verse 26, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose body the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. That's how you'll know when you went through it with God. If you come out of a situation a wreck, you probably didn't go through it with God. I'm not saying he wasn't there with you the whole time, but you probably were not trusting and relying on him. If you come out and all you can talk about is how bad it's been, and all you can do is think, oh my God, I just barely got that out of there by the skin of my teeth. And if everything you have is gone by the time you get out of it, and you feel like you've been burned, then you probably didn't go through it with him. But if you go through it believing and trusting in him, you come out of the fire and you don't even smell like fire. Don't even nobody know. You know, some of the most beautiful testimonies is when someone gets up and gives their testimony and you never even knew they were going through that.
Right.
Why? Because they didn't carry that smell of fire around with them. They didn't carry it around with them. You didn't even know what was happening to them till they got up and said it was over. Till they got up and said it was done. You didn't even know what was going on. Why? Because they went through the fire with God, and they came out on the other side, and everything looked just like it did when they went in. Just as happy, just as healthy as when you went in. And notice that everybody took notice. If you feel like you've been unnoticed for a long time, or people haven't cared, or even in this church, if you feel like, well, who knows about us? Who's going to take any notice? When they came out of that fire, princes, governors, captains, counselors, everybody gathered around them to see what was going on. Why? Because they wanted to know how these men did what they did.
Right.
They saw the miracles. Miracles get people's attention. I mean, that's just the way that it is. Even Jesus told him, he said, you follow me because of the miracles. If I do miracles, they all bring their people and they want their own people healed. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know there's some people, they're just walking around looking for a sign everywhere. But it's also true that sometimes when people need a miracle, it's the time they're going to trust God. And if they see you come through it, if they see that you had something, then they're going to want to be where you are, hearing what you hear, knowing what you know, because they see that you came out of it. At least they will if they have wisdom.
Yes.
They'll want to know, what'd you do to get out of it? You used to live in the house next door to me. How is it now that you live across town in a nicer house? What happened? And your job didn't change, and this didn't change, and none of that changed. How do you do it?
Yeah.
Dwayne, I get asked that. How do you do it? How does one of you stay? How does just one of you work and she stays home with the kids? How do you do it? God. Can't do it no other way. Not in this world. I mean, not in the system that's in place in this world. They'll tell you that everybody's got to work, and they got to work till they're so exhausted that they can't hardly lift a finger. And then for the rest of their lives, they got to live off whatever the government's willing to give them, and that's it. I mean, that's what the world system will tell you. And you have to rise above it and say no. And when you do, people are going to want to hear. It's the same thing with this church. They start seeing some of you come through fire and not have one part of you burned. They're going to want to know what's going on at Blessed Assurance Temple. They're going to know what kind of... Remember what they said about Jesus. They said, what manner of man is this? What kind of man is this? And they said it multiple times about him. They said it when he calmed the storm. They said it when he just got up and preached because he spoke with such authority. And they said nobody really believed that it could happen to them right then. Now, they all believed that there was a day of salvation coming down the road. That's what the Jews believed. One day a Messiah will come. One day the restoration of Israel will come. But they didn't really believe that something could show up in their lives right that minute. And sometimes that's our issue. One day we're going to be saved from the fire. One day we're going to get out of the storm. One day, someday, and it don't come until finally you go to heaven, and then finally you're free. After living, how many years just from one battle to the next down here. And that was never God's plan for our life. Or his plan is that people look at you and they say, what manner of man is this? What kind of man goes through this and comes out just as happy and clean and not smelling like anything bad has happened to him on the other side? How does that happen? What kind of man or man are you? What kind of manner of man goes through sickness and comes out the other side and I never even knew was sick?
Right.
What kind of person comes out of poverty with no education, no background, no anything to do it, and yet they do it? Bill Winston tells the story of the man that couldn't even read, and yet he was a multimillionaire. And finally went and learned how to read. Why? Just because the Lord showed him how to do it. Just because he wasn't afraid to walk through the fire. I'm sure he walked through many fires. I'm sure there were many people that told him, no, you can't. I'm sure there were many people that ridiculed him. I'm sure there were many people that had something negative to say about him. But he kept walking on, going through, and letting the Lord take care of it. And in the end, even people that, here we don't have kings, but we have people set up a lot of times that think they're kings over things. But even those that thought they were kings, the businessmen, the educated, had to bow down and say, something's with this man. Because I know way more than he knows, and yet he's outdoing me.
Yeah.
Something's with this man. And I wanted to give you this last part of it because, like I said in the beginning, the Lord spoke to me that a lot of us are going through fire, and we can't understand it because we got these great prophecies that said everything was going to be great, that we were going to hit promotion, that we were going to have more wealth, that we were going to get our healing, we were going to do all these things, and then it seems worse than it was before. Kind of wish they would have never gave us the prophecy, because it feels like they just dangled a carrot in front of our face, and then we didn't get it, Kind of wish they'd never got our hopes up. But it says in verse 28, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servant that trusted in him, and have changed the king's words. So if you've had anybody that claims to be a king that's spoken some words of you that you want changed, if somebody said something over you and you don't like what they had to say, you have a God that can change the king's words. And I don't care if that king's an employer, a doctor, your husband, your wife, your kid, your neighbor across the street. I don't care who said it to you. If they've said something over you that you don't like, you have a God that can change it. You don't have to be what they said you have to be. People only say negative and judge anyways just because they feel so bad about themselves. It's not because it's true about you. What really is the problem is they're scared it's true about them. So they got to deflect it onto somebody else. A lot of times people want to keep you down because they're down. They want to keep you poor because they're poor. Whether that be in the natural, in spirit, in soul, in body, whatever it is, they don't want you to be up above them. They don't see that they could be right where you are. They don't see that they could come up with you. They don't see that they could come up into the sun realm. But you cannot stay down because they're down. We have a call to come up hither, and it doesn't matter if anybody else around us wants to come up hither with us or not. They'll come up later. Every man in his own time. But you can't let them hold you back. If you do, you'll be like Moses, who died just like all the generation around him. Only got to glimpse the promised land, but never got to walk in it. Right. And how many Christians do we know that knew about the promised land, but they never walked in it? They knew healing was from God, but they didn't walk in healing. They knew prosperity was from God, but they didn't walk in it. I don't want to be someone that just looks out and sees it and says, yeah, that sounds great, that sounds nice, but I never walk in it and never experience it for myself. And I won't be held back just because there's a whole generation that don't want to hear it. Because you don't have to be. Because you can be a Joshua and a Caleb that stands up and says, we're going to believe it if nobody else believes it. And I don't care if we do have to wait 40 years for you guys to die. I'm just as strong at 80 as I was at 40. I'm not worried about it. I'm getting my mountain. One way or the other, I'm getting my mountain. So it says that he changed the king's words and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And then listen to verse 30. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Their promotion came on the other side of the fire. We're sitting around worrying about why our prophecy hasn't come to pass, why we're going through all this stuff, and you don't know that your prophecy is just on the other side of the fire if you just go on through it. If you just not bow your knee to what the king's saying. Because why? Because if you bow your knee, you never get the promotion. If they would have bowed in the first place, he wouldn't have promoted them. They would have stayed right where they were. But because they refused to bow, God showed up. He did a miracle. He did it in front of everybody for everybody to see. And then they got promoted. What looked like was going to be their death was their promotion. And it said they regarded not their bodies. Sometimes we cannot regard what's going on in the natural. We can't be so, the Lord told Abraham that he couldn't just build a house and stay there because he had to be able to move whenever the Lord told him to move. And sometimes we hang on to our stuff so much that we're not free to just get up and move when the Lord tells us to move. We're not free. But Lord, I can't do that. What about this? What about that? I got to take care of that. I got this tomorrow. I got that tomorrow. And we cannot just forget about all that and let the Lord take care of it. They forgot about it. They said, we don't care. You can hurt the body, but you can't hurt our spirits. You can't hurt our soul. So we're just going to trust God. And God showed up. And the very thing that looked like their demotion was leading to their promotion. And so the Lord just wanted me to encourage you this morning. Don't be discouraged. Don't feel like I got this great word and it's not coming to pass. Don't feel like just when we all get excited about it, just like I told you, just when you make a stand and everybody thinks we're excited, we're doing this, it looks like things get worse instead of better. Don't bow down to that. Because if you bow, then you won't see what's on the other side. If you bow, you won't get the miracle. If you bow, then you won't get any of the things that God has to do for you. He has so much, Paul said, exceeding abundantly, above all that we could ask or think. We have this little thing in our mind. All they wanted to do was just serve their God, and yet God had promotion right in front of them. Not to mention that he was going to teach a whole nation about him. Because once the king saw what happened, he said, look, everybody's going to hear about this God. I want everybody talking about him. He has greater things for you than what you can even think. And we always talk about it, but it's true. You have to let your trial be your testimony. You have to let what you're going through become a testimony. Don't let it just defeat you. Don't let it get you down. Don't stop standing on the word. Otherwise, you'll be like Matt said, he said he had that vision where he saw all these prophecies just put up on a shelf. And they were covered in dust. And nobody was living in them. Nobody was fulfilling them. Because we had put them up on the shelf and just decided that it must be for another time. It must be for another generation. It must not be for right now because I can't see it coming to pass in my life right now. But you got to get beyond what your eyes can see. If you have a word, keep standing on it. If you got a word from the Lord for promotion or for anything in your life that you've been needing, don't let your current situation dictate whether or not that word is true. It's true no matter what you're going through. It's true no matter what you face. And you have to be willing to say it's true even when everything's going against you, saying it's not, that it's not. Even if you have to walk through fire to get to it, no matter what happens, you have to decide that it's me and God and that's it. I don't care if my body goes crazy, my finances go crazy, my family goes crazy, everything goes crazy. Let God be God and every man a liar. Yeah. So we're going to get up and we're going to have our praise and worship, and I want you to praise and worship like everything is coming to pass. I want you to pray. They weren't even in that fire for an hour before someone looked in and said, wait a minute.
Amen.
Something crazy's going on in there. Get him out here so we can talk to him. You don't have to stay, I told you that the promotion, there's breakthrough even in the fire, but that don't mean the fire has to last for the next 6 months. That does not mean that you have to just sit there and take it 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 and let it wear you out and wear you out and wear you out. You have every right to stand up and say, no, the Lord's right here in the midst with me. He's right here where I am in this fire. And like I told you, we dance in the fire. We walk around. We have a good old time because we know what's on the other side. We know that this too shall pass. We know joy comes in the morning. We're not feeling down because we had to walk through a little fire. We go through fire and we say, I'm coming out like pure gold. Everything's being burned out of me. Thank you, Lord, you're taking it all out. Whatever wasn't supposed to be there, you're taking it out, and we're coming through to the other side. God bless you this morning.